Hi, my name is Simone and I am 3D supervisor at Mark Roberts Motion Control. In this Simul8 tutorial, I will show you how to use the new features introduced with version 1.0.5. Import rig kinematics from Flair and import axis limits from Flair. In order to export kinematics from Flair, what we need to do is to press on File, Config Data, Export Text Config and Set Export File. I want to export the kinematics, so what I'm going to set the file with is bow truck kines. Once I've set up the name of the file, I need to go back to config data and export text config and then press on kinematics. Flair will then write the complete list of kinematics into a human readable file. It's 39 parameters. You can double check them if you want. They should be the same. Let's close this and go to Maya. I will then import a bow with rig mover and then import Flair rig kinematics and then select bow truck kines. The first thing that you notice is that the lift axis is popping up. So let me open the hierarchy. This is the lift axis, if you can see that. Wireframe mode. Yeah, so the reason why that popped up is because the base mount in Flair in kinematics setups, the base mount value, height of the base mount in Flair is taking in consideration also the height of the rail from the ground. And that it's fine if you need to configure properly the 3D working inside of Flair. So if you want a camera 3D data that is properly offset vertically from the ground floor in your real studio, once you've set up the rig and the rails are leveled properly, then you need to set this value properly. So, and that you would take a tape measure and then measure the distance of the camera from the floor, the distance from the height of the base mount from the floor, and then the Flair system will set up everything accordingly to that. However, in Maya, the height of the base mount, it's simply the height of the rotate axis from the top of the truck, and that is because if you want to compensate after you've leveled the rail and the truck, the only thing you have to do is to basically lift the rigs up in 3D in Maya without using the kinematics. So how do you compensate for this? Well, what you need to do is basically measure with a tape measure what's the distance between the floor and the top of the rail, and then subtract it to your base mount into the kinematic files. So in this case, the height of the base mount is 98 centimeters, and I know that in this Flair kinematics setup, the height of the rail from the ground, from the floor to the top of the bearings rail, the rail is 18 centimeters. So I will set this to 80 and save. And I need to do this before importing the kinematics in Maya. So the right workflow will be first set up your kinematics in Flair, measure the height of the base mount from the floor once you've leveled the rail, and that would be 98 centimeters. Export the kinematic files, then subtract the height of the rail, which is 18 centimeters, to the height of the base mount. And that's variable every time you're going to set up and level the rail in a new position or in a new location. That's technically different. It's going to be different. And then import it back to your rig in Simul8. So let's import it again. Yeah, that looks much better. if you want to be scrupulous, what you can do also is to select the rig mover node and open the attribute editor. Under extra attributes, you will find a list of the kinematics that the rig mover shape node is using in order to reverse animate this rig. Now, this setup and this workflow is basically passing through only the kinematics file. When it comes to the nodal offset, you will still have to copy them over manually. So what you want to do is to go back to Flair and check out under setup, lens setup, and check out the lens that you're using at the moment, and then copy the nodal offset over to your rig mover shape node into Maya, because those are not going through the kinematics files. If we want to instead export the axis values and limits, there are only 4 values that the let's go to the numeric. There are only 4 values that Simul8 is interested in, and those are when it comes to the axis limits, and those are the axis velocity, the axis acceleration, the maximum limit, and the minimum limit. This is all that Simul8 needs to know inside the limit checker in order to solve a move properly. Everything else is not. It's for Flair. So what you want to do, it's very similar to how to export the kinematics from the kinematics file, and it's go to File, Common. So it was export text config and set export file. Let's set it to axis limits. Save. And config data, export text config, and now export axis, all axis. You can also select axis, but let's do axis first. Axis data has been appended to file. What I want to stress about is that the naming of the axis in Flair has to be the same as the naming of the axis in Simul8. And because you can't change the name of the axis in Simul8 yet, what we will have to do is to be careful that the axes are matching the same name, uppercase and lowercase included, before exporting them into the axis limits and values file. Let's open it and let's see how it looks like. So axis configuration has got like a very long list of values per axis. So nothing to change here, it looks alright. So let's open Maya and let's check the limit checker. So my input track maximum velocity at the moment is 4.9 and my track maximum acceleration is 5.7 with a minimum and maximum value of -1 and 1. So it is the same workflow and same way of importing the file. So select the rig node and then import kinematics. Actually, I want to import axis limits this time. Select the axis limits and then let's check if they've been updated. Yes, now I've got different values, -4.6 and minimum value, and a maximum value is 5, and then I've got different velocities and different acceleration. Let's double check if that is the case. I will do that just for the track axis, but obviously I encourage you to do that for all the other axes, just to be sure. So my maximum velocity is 500 and that's 5, and my maximum acceleration is 600 and that's 6. There is a scaling conversion done automatically for you because the limit checker works with 1 unit per meter rather than 1 unit per centimeters. So don't worry if the number is not the same, as it's like hundreds times bigger. And that will be the same for the extend into crane-like rigs, like Milo, for example, or Titan. So 500 and -4.6, 500 and -4.6, and then I'm okay with that. So this is how you update your axis limits, and that's useful if you have Flair and a rig set up properly on set and you want to quickly pass over the files and update all the limits and kinematics of your 3D system in Simul8. And one last quick thing that I want to talk about before we wrap up this tutorial is if you are looking into importing kinematics files from a Milo motion control system or a crane-like one, the way that Flair manages the height of the 3D data from the ground is through camera height at 0. If you remember from robot kind of motion control, it's with the height of the base from the floor, whereas with Cyclops like crane-like type, it's using camera height at 0, the value. So you will see that if I add, for example, here 3 centimeters, and let's go to 60. Actually, let's make it higher, a bit higher. Let's make it 1, just to make it clear. Let's go 1 meter. What you will see if I apply and then update. Yes, if I and then update the rig model, you will see that the whole arm and the axis of the lift axis is basically like lifting up, so bringing the camera higher effectively related to the ground. Let's bring it back to 577, apply it, and let's refresh the view. Right. In order to export correctly these kinematics, what Simul8 is reading is the lift pivot height. So these has to be the measurements between the top of the row and the height of your lift pivot, and that's what Simul8 is going to read in order to set up the distance of the rig properly. One thing to mention is also that Flair doesn't care about this value, so this value is not going to be like the camera height at 0 value, is not going to influence the working state of the kinematics in Flair. So Flair, even if this was 0, Flair would still work properly, and the target tracking modes and everything else in the data and in the setups will be fine. And with this, for this tutorial, it's all. If you have any questions, suggestions, or comment, please don't hesitate to write us an email to support@markroberts.com. And to the next one.